The flashing red light on the server rack pulsed like a frantic heartbeat in the cavernous, air-conditioned room. It was 3 a.m. Not a system alert. Not a network failure. This was different. This was a direct feed. A secure line, indicating an unauthorized access attempt. Or rather, a deletion. A chilling chill ran down the spine of the lone technician. Terabytes of data, encrypted and sprawling across continents, were simply vanishing. Not hacked, not stolen, erased. System logs, financial records, client identities. Everything linked to the burgeoning OneCoin empire. A ghost in the machine was cleaning house. Swiftly, silently, leaving only empty directories in its wake. The technician, a seasoned veteran of countless digital skirmishes, had never seen anything so audacious, so utterly brazen. This wasn't a random cyber attack. It was a deliberate, surgical strike from within. Fear knotted in his gut. This wasn't just data. It was the digital footprint of a multi-billion-dollar phenomenon. A financial revolution that had swept the globe, promising riches to millions. Now, it was being wiped from existence, as if it had never been. The screen flickered, displaying the impossible. The primary gateway server, one of the most secure nodes, was now completely empty. The implications were immediate, catastrophic. Without these records, there was no proof of transaction, no ledger, no verifiable assets. The entire edifice, built on the promise of a digital future, was collapsing into an abyss of nothingness. The only person with the master access, the override codes, the power to orchestrate such a digital cleansing, was the architect herself, Dr. Ruja Ignatova. But she was gone. Had been for weeks. Her last known whereabouts, a quiet apartment in Sofia, Bulgaria, was now just another empty space. The red light continued its desperate flashing. A silent scream for the 3 a.m. technician, echoing the growing panic that was about to engulf millions of investors across the world. The crypto queen had not just vanished. She had taken her kingdom with her, leaving behind only dust and a digital void. Before the digital apocalypse, there was Ruja Ignatova, the captivating, enigmatic force who strode onto stages in designer gowns, radiating an almost hypnotic confidence. She was brilliant, undeniably, educated at Oxford, a PhD in law from Constance, a former consultant at McKinsey & Company. Her resume read like a blueprint for legitimate success. She spoke multiple languages, commanded rooms with an effortless charm, and possessed an uncanny ability to simplify complex financial concepts into digestible, tantalizing promises. Her vision, she declared, was to empower the unbanked, to democratize finance through a revolutionary cryptocurrency. OneCoin. From Sofia, Bulgaria, a city far from the traditional financial hubs, she spun a narrative of disruption. Bitcoin, she argued, was too volatile, too opaque, too inaccessible for the everyday person. OneCoin would be different. It would be a stable, user-friendly digital currency, backed by a sophisticated, private blockchain, offering unprecedented security and growth. She painted a picture of a future where anyone, anywhere, could be part of a global financial revolution, free from the shackles of traditional banks. Her words were honeyed, her delivery flawless, her conviction absolute. She wasn't just selling a cryptocurrency. She was selling a dream of financial independence, of early retirement, of escaping the grind. Her marketing was slick, pervasive, promising a future where OneCoin would surpass Bitcoin, becoming the world's #1 digital currency. People flocked to her, captivated by her intelligence, her charisma, her audacious vision. They saw not a charlatan, but a savior, a brilliant mind ready to lead them to prosperity. The early adopters, fueled by testimonials and projections, poured their savings into the burgeoning empire. Blinded by the dazzling light of the crypto queen, they believed every word, every promise, every meticulously crafted slide in her presentations.
Even as OneCoin soared, propelled by Ruja's magnetic charm and the fervent belief of its growing army of evangelists, a dissonant chorus began to emerge from the shadows. Early on, quiet whispers gave way to louder, more pointed questions from cryptocurrency experts and financial journalists. "Where is the blockchain?" they demanded. "Show us the verifiable transactions, the open ledger." Their queries were met with obfuscation, dismissals, and accusations of ignorance. OneCoin's private, proprietary blockchain, Ruja insisted, was simply too advanced, too secure for public scrutiny. A convenient excuse, critics argued, for a technology that likely didn't exist. Regulators, initially slow to grasp the rapidly evolving crypto world, began to stir. Germany's BaFin, Hungary's central bank, and financial authorities across Europe issued preliminary warnings, cautioning against unregistered investment schemes. These warnings, however, were often drowned out by OneCoin's aggressive marketing machine and the unwavering conviction of its community. For many, these official alerts were merely signs that traditional institutions feared OneCoin's revolutionary potential, not that the project itself was fraudulent. The financial establishment, they believed, simply couldn't comprehend the future. But the warnings grew more insistent. Legal action began to simmer in various jurisdictions. The lack of a verifiable product, the relentless pressure to recruit, the promise of exponential returns, these were classic hallmarks of a pyramid scheme, dressed in the new, seductive language of cryptocurrency. The whispers grew into murmurs, then into shouts, but for millions caught in the allure, the sound of Ruja's promises was still louder. The cracks were appearing, subtle at first, then widening, threatening to shatter the carefully constructed reality of the crypto queen's empire. The foundations, built on air, were starting to tremble. By 2016, Ruja Ignatova was at the zenith of her power, a global celebrity in the nascent crypto world. Her defining moment arrived in June, on the grand stage of Wembley Arena in London. Thousands of ecstatic followers, many having traveled across continents, packed the iconic venue. The atmosphere was electric, a revival meeting for a new financial religion. Dressed in a dazzling red gown, Ruja descended onto the stage amidst pyrotechnics and deafening cheers, her image projected onto massive screens. It was a spectacle designed to inspire awe, to solidify belief, to erase any lingering doubts. From the Wembley stage, she unveiled her boldest promise yet, the launch of the OneCoin exchange, where investors could finally trade their digital currency for fiat money. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the tangible realization of their dreams, the proof that their investments were real. The crowd erupted, a roaring affirmation of faith. For many in that arena, Ruja was a visionary, a liberator, leading them to untold wealth. The sheer scale of the event, the palpable energy, the collective conviction, it was an intoxicating blend that overshadowed every red flag, every warning from skeptics. This was not just marketing, it was mass hypnosis. The sheer audacity of staging such an event in one of the world's financial capitals sent a powerful message: OneCoin was legitimate, too big to fail. The global expansion accelerated, reaching into developing nations where the promise of quick wealth resonated deeply. People mortgaged homes, cashed out pensions, and drained life savings, pouring everything into what they believed was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Wembley was not just a rally, it was the ultimate illusion, cementing Ruja's status as a global financial guru, even as the walls of her fabricated empire were built on increasingly shaky ground. The roar of the crowd was deafening, drowning out the faint sounds of an impending crash. Behind the dazzling spectacle of Wembley, the truth of OneCoin was far grimmer, far more mundane than anyone imagined. The promise of an exchange where OneCoins could be traded for real money. A complete fabrication. The private blockchain? A digital mirage. Forensic investigations would later confirm what skeptics had long suspected: OneCoin did not possess an actual blockchain. There was no decentralized ledger, no cryptographic validation, no independent mining. Instead, a SQL database, rudimentary and centralized, simply recorded transactions on a server controlled entirely by Ruja's inner circle. This revelation pulled the rug out from under the entire operation. Without a true blockchain, OneCoin was nothing more than numbers in a database, controlled by a single entity. It was digital monopoly money, its value entirely dictated by the OneCoin organization, rather than market forces or cryptographic proof. The mining process was a charade, an automated script generating new coins at predefined intervals, not a result of complex computational work. Every promise about security, transparency, and independence was a lie. And then, a darker truth began to surface: the desperation to move the enormous sums of money flooding into OneCoin. As legitimate banking channels began to freeze accounts and raise suspicions, Ruja and her closest associates reportedly turned to more illicit avenues. Allegations, later backed by intercepted communications and testimony, suggested dealings with powerful organized crime syndicates for money laundering. This wasn't just about a brilliant con artist, it was about a woman increasingly entangled with dangerous figures, creating an even more perilous web. The digital illusion, devoid of a real blockchain or a functioning exchange, was propped up by pure fraud and, now, by the chilling specter of criminal underworld connections. The game was becoming infinitely more dangerous, the stakes exponentially higher. As OneCoin's fraudulent nature became undeniable, the scattered whispers from financial critics transformed into a concerted roar from law enforcement agencies worldwide. The FBI, initially monitoring from afar, ramped up its investigations, collaborating with European authorities. Germany's Federal Criminal Police Office, along with prosecutors in Bielefeld, began building a formidable case. Money laundering investigations in the UK, racketeering charges in the US, and fraud probes across Asia and Africa painted a clear picture: Ruja Ignatova was no longer just a controversial figure, she was a global criminal target. Key arrests began to chip away at the OneCoin hierarchy. In early 2017, Ruja's brother, Konstantin Ignatov, who had stepped in to lead the company's public face, was apprehended at Los Angeles International Airport. This was a seismic shock, a clear signal that the authorities were no longer just issuing warnings, they were actively dismantling the operation. Other high-ranking associates and promoters faced arrests and indictments, their luxurious lives suddenly crashing down under the weight of the law. The global pursuit was on, closing in on the woman at the center of it all. The pressure mounted relentlessly. Bank accounts linked to OneCoin were frozen, legal challenges intensified, and the sheer volume of victim complaints became impossible to ignore. Ruja, once a frequent flyer, commanding stages with effortless grace, now found herself increasingly isolated, her movements restricted. The lavish lifestyle, the private jets, the opulent homes, all became liabilities, drawing unwanted attention. The net was tightening around the crypto queen, transforming her from a revered visionary into a hunted fugitive. Every new indictment, every frozen asset, brought the investigation one step closer to her door, to the architect of the multi-billion-dollar deception. The relentless pressure from global law enforcement inevitably began to crack the facade of loyalty within OneCoin's upper echelons. When the walls of a criminal enterprise start to crumble, desperation sets in, and loyalty often proves to be a fleeting commodity. Key figures, once staunch defenders of Ruja's vision, faced with the prospect of lengthy prison sentences, began to make agonizing decisions. The most significant of these was Mark Scott, a former U.S. attorney, implicated in laundering hundreds of millions for OneCoin. Facing overwhelming evidence, Scott ultimately flipped, becoming a crucial informant. Scott's testimony provided invaluable insight into the inner workings of the organization, the movement of funds, and critically, the direct involvement of Ruja Ignatova in the scheme. He detailed how OneCoin relied on shell companies and complex financial maneuvers to funnel money globally, escaping the scrutiny of regulators. His revelations painted a stark picture of a meticulously planned criminal operation, not a misguided business venture. But Scott wasn't the only crack. Sebastian Greenwood, a co-founder and mastermind of the MLM structure, also began cooperating, offering further damning evidence. These betrayals sent shockwaves through the already fractured organization. Ruja, once untouchable, now faced the terrifying reality that her most trusted lieutenants were turning against her, providing prosecutors with the evidence needed to build an ironclad case. The internal dissent, the fear of capture, the growing distrust, it all culminated in an atmosphere of paranoia. Ruja knew the game was up. The digital footprint she thought she had erased still had human connections, and those connections were now talking. The carefully constructed web of deceit was unraveling from the inside out, piece by agonizing piece. With her inner circle crumbling and global law enforcement closing in, Ruja Ignatova's public appearances became increasingly frantic, almost manic. She knew the end was near, yet she continued to play the role of the visionary leader, albeit with a noticeable tremor in her voice, a flicker of desperation in her eyes. Her last known public address was in October 2017, at a company event in Lisbon, Portugal. The usual effervescent confidence was replaced by a strained urgency, a desperate plea for her followers to maintain faith. She vaguely alluded to obstacles and external forces attempting to destabilize OneCoin, never acknowledging the very real, very legal threats against her. Behind the scenes, the frantic activity was a stark contrast to her public calm. Communications intercepted by authorities revealed a woman under immense pressure, coordinating complex logistical maneuvers, attempting to secure new identities, and discussing escape routes. The focus shifted from growing the empire to preserving herself. She was liquidating assets, funneling money through untraceable channels, preparing for an abrupt, complete disappearance. The multi-billion-dollar fraud was now secondary to her own survival. Even as she stood on stage, reassuring her most loyal investors, the plans for her vanish were likely already in motion. The elaborate gowns and dazzling smile were a mask, hiding the frantic machinations of a cornered individual. Her words, once inspiring, now served as a final, desperate distraction. She was buying time, creating a smokescreen, using the very belief she had cultivated to shield her final movements. The crypto queen was not planning her next grand announcement, she was planning her great escape. The final act was not a triumphant reveal, but a carefully orchestrated vanishing act, leaving millions in financial ruin and a global manhunt in her wake. The curtain was about to fall. The exact moments of Ruja Ignatova's disappearance are shrouded in a chilling veil of precision and secrecy. We know this much: on October 25, 2017, just weeks after her last public appearance in Lisbon, Dr. Ruja Ignatova boarded a commercial flight from Sofia, Bulgaria, to Athens, Greece. This wasn't a sudden, panicked flight, it was a pre-planned operation, executed with clinical efficiency. She wasn't fleeing alone. She was accompanied by 2 bodyguards, men with shadowy connections, whose identities remain largely protected by the very networks Ruja had likely cultivated through her alleged money laundering operations. The Athens airport security cameras captured her final confirmed public sighting, the woman, still impeccably dressed, though perhaps with a hint of tension in her stride, moving through the terminal. After that, she simply evaporated. No return flight was ever registered. No onward journey through official channels was detected. It was as if she walked out of the airport and into thin air. The trail went cold, immediate and absolute. The flight manifest, the security footage, the eyewitness accounts, they all point to Athens as the point of no return, the last known location of the woman who orchestrated a multi-billion-dollar global fraud. Her phone, a crucial piece of digital evidence, pinged its last signal from Athens. After that, silence. This wasn't an accidental disappearance, it was a deliberate, meticulously orchestrated vanishing act. The crypto queen had not merely gone into hiding, she had been swallowed by an unseen force, facilitated by resources far beyond the reach of standard law enforcement. Was it a private jet? A clandestine boat? A network of safe houses? The details remain elusive, a proof to the power of the architects behind her escape. The most wanted woman in the financial world had simply ceased to exist, leaving only rumors and a staggering emptiness behind. With Ruja Ignatova gone, the carefully constructed illusion of OneCoin shattered, revealing the devastating reality beneath. Millions of investors, lured by the promise of easy wealth, were left with nothing but worthless digital tokens in a defunct database. The impact was catastrophic, extending far beyond mere financial loss. Retirees saw their life savings vanish. Families, who had pooled resources, found themselves destitute. Small business owners, convinced to invest their working capital, faced bankruptcy. The human cost was immense, measured in shattered dreams, broken trust, and widespread despair. Across villages in Uganda, bustling markets in Vietnam, and quiet suburban homes in Europe, the story was the same: profound betrayal. Testimonies poured in, heartbreaking accounts of individuals who had been convinced by friends, family, or charismatic recruiters to invest everything. They believed they were part of a revolutionary movement, only to discover they were victims of one of history's largest financial frauds. The OneCoin community, once a symbol of unity and shared ambition, dissolved into a collective lament of anger and profound grief. The global scale of the fraud was staggering, estimated at over $4 billion, potentially reaching up to $15 billion according to some estimates. But for each individual victim, it was personal: the lost inheritance, the postponed education, the foreclosed home. The echoes of ruin reverberated through countless lives, a grim proof to the power of a charismatic con artist and the seductive allure of quick riches. Ruja Ignatova left behind not just a financial void, but a gaping wound in the trust of millions, a scar that would forever mark their financial futures. The queen was gone, but her devastating legacy remained, etched into the lives of her victims. The disappearance of Ruja Ignatova ignited a global manhunt, unparalleled in the history of financial crime. The FBI placed her on their 10 most wanted fugitives list, offering a staggering reward for information leading to her arrest. Interpol issued a red notice, alerting law enforcement agencies worldwide. But tracking a ghost with billions at her disposal and potential ties to powerful criminal entities proved to be an almost impossible task. Theories about her whereabouts proliferated, each more speculative than the last. Was she hiding in Dubai, shielded by illicit wealth? Had she undergone extensive plastic surgery, living an anonymous life in a secluded luxury compound? Some theories even suggested she might no longer be alive, silenced by the very criminal networks that facilitated her escape. Yet, no body has ever been found, no credible evidence of her demise has surfaced. The official stance remains: she is alive, she is on the run, and she is extremely dangerous, capable of financing her continued evasion. The investigation continues, relentlessly pursuing every faint lead. Detectives pore over financial records, monitor communications of her former associates, and follow the money trails, however convoluted. But Ruja seems to possess an uncanny ability to stay one step ahead, to remain in the shadows, a specter haunting the financial world. The hunt for the crypto queen is not just about bringing a criminal to justice, it's about retrieving billions stolen from millions, about providing closure for those whose lives she irrevocably altered. The ghost of Ruja Ignatova continues to cast a long, dark shadow across the globe, a constant reminder of an unsolved mystery, an unpunished crime of epic proportions. As the global hunt for Ruja intensified, the murky connection she cultivated began to solidify into chilling evidence. It wasn't just about a brilliant con artist, but a highly sophisticated operation leveraging the brutal efficiency of organized crime. Court documents and investigative reporting, particularly in Germany, revealed damning ties between OneCoin's money laundering operations and high-profile figures within Eastern European criminal syndicates. This wasn't merely speculation, it was the documented reality of how billions were moved and protected. Perhaps the most shocking revelation involved OneCoin's alleged dealings with Hell's Angels in Germany. Funds, prosecutors argued, were funneled through shell companies and even seemingly legitimate businesses, effectively cleaning vast sums of illicit cash for both the criminal organizations and OneCoin. This symbiotic relationship provided Ruja with the muscle, the network, and the expertise in circumventing financial regulations that no legitimate business would dare touch. In return, OneCoin became a prime vehicle for money laundering, a perfect digital washing machine for dirty money. These connections painted a grim picture. Ruja wasn't just fleeing the law, she was potentially under the protection of, or even beholden to, dangerous criminal elements. Her disappearance might not have been solely her choice, but an enforced vanishing act orchestrated by those with a vested interest in keeping her silent, or at least untraceable. The initial image of a lone, charismatic mastermind began to fade, replaced by the terrifying reality of a woman deeply enmeshed in a global criminal underworld. The hunt for Ruja Ignatova was no longer just a financial investigation, it was a high-stakes pursuit into the darkest corners of international organized crime, where the stakes were life and death, and silence was often enforced with extreme prejudice. Years have passed since Ruja Ignatova vanished from Athens, but her ghost lingers, a phantom architect of one of the largest financial frauds in history. Her story is a searing indictment of unchecked ambition, blind faith, and the inherent dangers lurking within unregulated financial frontiers. OneCoin became a cautionary tale, forever scarring the nascent cryptocurrency space and forcing regulators worldwide to confront the vulnerabilities exposed by its audacious deception. The push for stricter oversight, for verifiable blockchain technology, and for investor protection accelerated dramatically in her wake. But the mystery endures. Where is she? Is she truly free, living a lavish life on a hidden beach, or is she a prisoner of the very networks that spirited her away? The questions continue to plague investigators and victims alike. The OneCoin saga is not merely a tale of fraud, it's a modern myth of aspiration and betrayal, a proof to the enduring power of human desire for wealth and the devastating consequences when the desire is exploited by a master manipulator. Ruja Ignatova redefined the meaning of a disappearing act, leaving behind a legacy of financial ruin and an enduring enigma. Her story remains unfinished, a gaping wound in the annals of true crime. The billions are still gone. The victims still yearn for justice. And somewhere, in the shadows, the crypto queen continues her reign of invisibility, a ghost in the machine, a silent echo of a vanished fortune. Until she is found, until the truth of her fate is revealed, the legend of Ruja Ignatova, the woman who vanished with billions, will remain one of the most captivating and disturbing unsolved mysteries of our time. The unseen future awaits, holding the final chapter to a story that continues to haunt us all.